Today is the workshop 2, and we are going to learn about cloud networks and databases. Do you guys see the PowerPoint screen?
Yeah.
So do we have multi-factor authentication set up from last week? Because we couldn't complete that. So if you haven't done so, I want you guys to do that first. Do you guys have your accounts created already?
Yes.
Right. So you have 2 accounts created, right?
The other one is the IAM account, right?
Yeah, the second one is the IAM, then other one is the root account. So can you guys log into the root account? I will show how to, and you also need to download the Google Authenticator to your iPhone or the Android phone to set up multi-factor authentication. So let me show how to do that. So I'm going to log into my root account so that you can follow me. Have you logged into your root account? You guys hear me?
Yes, yes, we have. I
So
mean, I have at least.
okay, so are you guys in the console? Have you logged into the console? No. I don't know why I can't share it. This thing. Do you see my console? No, not yet.
No, we can see it.
Okay, so here you go to IAM service, and then you go to, you click on this enable MFA here. Sorry, and then you go to activate MFA. Right, hope you can follow me. So now you select this virtual MFA device. So if you have Google Authenticator installed on your iPhone or Android, you select this option and say continue. And now you are going to get a QR code. So what I want you to do is, okay, you can ask to show. I want you to scan this, but also I want you to take a screenshot of this from, if you're in Windows or Mac, you can use that screenshot tool to take a screenshot of this QR. So in case if you lose your phone or you need to set up multi-factor authentication in another device, you can easily do that if you have the QR code. So I'm also going to do that. I'm going to scan this QR code in Google Authenticator. And then you have to enter two, now you should see a 6-digit number generated for this QR code by the authenticator. So you have to enter 2 subsequent MFA codes. So then your device will be synced to the account. So I'm going to do that now. So it is reset. It is refreshed every 30 seconds. if you have difficulty following me, please let me know. Right. So it says you have successfully assigned virtual multi-factor authentication. Right. Now, for the root account, I have done the setup. I want to do the same for my IAM user as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sign out, right, from my console. And then I'm going to log in with my IAM account to do the same. Now, I think are you guys, were you able to set up for the root account, the MFA? If you have any issues doing that, please post in the chat or just ask. You can unmute yourself and ask questions, right? No issues interrupting in the middle. So just feel free to ask if you have anything. So unfortunately, I forgot to copy my account ID. So I'm going to log in back to my root user to copy that. Let me see if I have that somewhere here. No, it's not here. Okay, so I'm going to log back. Now it's asking for that MFA code also, so I have to submit that now. So this is that account number that I want to log in as a IAM user. So I'm going to copy that. Now I'm going to sign out and log in again as an IAM user. So when I click IAM user, I have to enter that 12-digit account number. Then I click next. Then I select the username that my IAM user email address that I have as this, and I enter the password also. So when I'm here, I'm going to set up MFA for this account also. So you have to go to users, select your username, and go to security credentials. And here you say no MFA is assigned. So you go there and you say manage. You add the MFA device, virtual MFA device, the same way that you did for the root account. I want you to get a screenshot of the QR code. And then I'm going to scan this with my authenticator. Right. So subsequent codes I need to enter again for the syncing. Okay, now for both accounts, I have multi-factor authentication set up. So this part actually we couldn't do last week, so we did that now. And now we can move to our presentation today. And meantime, I want you to download MySQL Workbench, because we are going to set up work AWS database, and we are going to connect to that using MySQL Workbench. So I want you to have that set up too. So let me share my slides again with you. We should learn some basic things about how the cloud architecture is set up around the globe. So they have what you call regions. This is common for all cloud providers, not just for AWS. You take GCP, Azure, they all have this concept of regions, availability zones, and edge locations. Their names might be a little different, but the regions and availability zones are mostly same. They might use different other names for edge locations. So if you consider AWS, as of now, they have around 25 regions around the globe and 80 availability zones and 218 edge locations. So what do you mean by region and availability zones? They are like 20 regions are like one, I would say one geographic location, maybe a part of a country. It's a very wide, a region will cover a wider area of a network, and a region might include several availability zone. Minimum there should be 2, but they can have multiple availability zones in one single region. That is mainly to overcome failovers, to overcome downtimes, because sometimes if if a particular system running on one availability zone becomes unavailable, maybe due to some natural disaster or due to some power outage or anything, if something happens in one availability zone, they have the cloud providers have the flexibility to transfer that infrastructure to another availability zone in the same region. That is why they say each region should have a minimum of 2 availability zones. If they have only one availability zone, that means they cannot provide that availability or the durability that they guarantee. So minimum 2 availability zones are in a region, but there can be more. For instance, last week I told you about regions in the console like US East 1, US East 2. So US East 1 is the oldest region in AWS, and it has currently around 6 availability zones. So likewise, there can be from 2 to many number of availability zones in a single region. Then we have another network area called edge location, that is covering only another small area that is mainly used to cache content. You cannot run any servers basically in edge locations, but generally some edge locations are kind of storage location. For instance, if you wanted to let's assume that you have a YouTube viewer in Asia Pacific region, and that viewer wants to view a YouTube video that is hosted in the US East 1 region. So if every time that video is viewed, if the system had to bring that video from US East 1 to that Asia Pacific region every time that is viewed by a user, it will cost so much for the bandwidth and network traffic. So in order to prevent that, what happens is, in the first instance, when it is requested by a user, you get that through the network and you store that video in what you call the edge location as cache. So next time when a particular user from the same region wants to view that video, You don't have to come all the way to the US East one. You can simply view it from that edge location. So that reduces network traffic, and it reduces latency as well. So that is the purpose of edge locations. You can't run much services from edge locations, but you are trying to save network traffic by caching content at edge locations. So that's basic idea you want to know about these regions, availability zones, and edge locations. Now we are going to learn about some networking. So network in a cloud is called a VPC, virtual private cloud. And inside that bigger network, we create we create multiple small networks called subnets, or simply subnetworks. So you can have two types of subnets, like public subnet and private subnet. So let me pose you one question. In a system, what sort of components you place in a private subnet and a public subnet? If you have some experience or experience with a system design or website design, you can give me some hints. What components are you going to include in a private subnet? Yeah, feel free to unmute and give an answer.
I think one thing you might put in a private subnet would be your database instance.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Database should always be in a private subnet. Yeah, that's an interesting answer. Any other guesses? You can be wrong, but you can just give a try. Yeah, I'll just explain. So for instance, a backend server, right? You don't want to expose your backend to public. So I think I forgot to mention what you mean by a public and private. So you get the idea. It's private means it's closed, public means it's open. But theoretically, what a public and private means, you have public subnet is open to internet, right? One of the ports you open to the internet, uh, for the entire internet network. What in private subnet, only the instances inside that network can communicate, and no user or no instance that is in the internet can communicate with a private subnet. So as you said, database should ideally be placed in a private subnet. Your backend servers could be placed. And what would you placed in a public subnet? You can put load balancers. You say that it's another instance actually that balances the load. If you have a lot of workload to do and you have so many user requests, you create a load balancer. So you can divide your traffic load among several instances, and your instances will never run out of memory or CPU. So such a load balancer should ideally be placed in a public subnet. And sometimes based on your application, you might decide to place a front-end server also in a public subnet, but it's good to still place that in a private subnet and grant access to that server through the load balancer. So only the load balancer is always exposed to internet. Then those are the few things that you can place in private and public subnet. Then we are going to learn about something called security groups. I'll give you a more detailed explanation later. And we are going to learn about CIDR blocks. CIDR blocks is a kind of way that you write networks. You determine what is the network address range, what is the smallest IP number and the largest IP number that you could give to an instance in a network. That kind of things we will cover under CIDR blocks. And then we need to know about internet gateway, because your public subnet should be able to connect to the internet through an internet gateway. So internet gateway provides these two purposes. For internet routable traffic, you need to have an internet gateway, right? And apart from that, if it also provides this network address translation job for the instances that have a public IP address. We will cover all that in the rest of the demo and the workshop. So we will move to the.
So I have a question.
Yeah,
The CIDR blocks,
yeah.
you said that we can specify a range of IP addresses, right? Is that range supposed to be, let's say I specify a range that has only 4 IP addresses in that.
Mhm.
Does that mean only these 4 IP addresses would be able to connect to my instances? Is that why CIDR blocks are used?
Yeah, for instance, you can create a CIDR block for your bigger network, the VPC, right?
Mhm.
And for your then that VPC, in that VPC you can have multiple subnets. So each subnets will also have its own CIDR block. So whatever the CIDR block IP address range that you specify for the VPC, your subnet can take range of that bigger IP address. So for instance, let me now mm, let's assume that you have an IP address range like this 10.0.0.0, right? 10 and 3 zeros. And for the VPC, you say, okay, it can go from 10.0.0.0 to 10.0.0.255. Okay.
Okay.
So there are 256 IP addresses that you can get in that VPC. Now you can divide that IP range into the subnets as 10.0.0.0 to 127. Okay.
Okay.
So there will be 128 addresses available for one subnet. And then for the next subnet, you can say, I want 10.0.0.128 to 255. So the next subnet also will have another 128 IP addresses. Okay.
Okay.
So that is the way that you manipulate CIDR blocks to assign IP addresses to your subnets and VPCs. We will create VPCs and subnets, and then we will try to understand how you can divide a VPC IP range to a subnet IP range and all that, right? We will do a demo. Right? Any other questions? Okay. So let me move to the other. So I want you to log in with your IAM user, right? And so these are the CIDR blocks that you will need for your subnets and VPCs. And let me have the screen minimized while I'm doing the console work. Okay, so I have that here. Okay. So I am in my IAM user. So I'm going to type here VPC. So that is one of the AWS services that we are learning in this course. So I select VPC and I want to create a new VPC, right? So I go to create VPC. If you have difficulty in following me, please post in the chat or ask me to slow down. Okay, we have enough time. It won't take much time to finish this thing because it's fairly easy, the demo and everything. So we go to create VPC and you can give a name here. I would say Cloud Computing Workshop VPC2, right? We can give a name like that. And now here specify the CIDR block. So let me show you some. Let me stop sharing for a second. Are you seeing my console?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me stop screen sharing for a second. And do a, I should have included here in my site. So this is one example that I want to show you. So CIDR blocks is represented by like an IP address that you are familiar with and a forward stroke and a number here that is between 0 and 32. Okay, so what is meant by this notation is you here specify the first address of your IP address range. Okay, and this one specifies out of this IP address. So you should know that these four, now there are four numbers you see here, 172, 16, 0 and 0. And you can translate this to a binary number, right? This 172 is translated as this, 16 is translated as this, 0 and 0. So there are four 8-digit binary numbers represented by this IP address. Okay, 8-digit here, 8-digit here, 8-digit here, 8-digit here. So altogether it will be 32. So this 24 suggests that out of this 32, first 24 is going to be the network address, right? Network address means this cannot change for that particular network. Only the remaining, so 32 minus 24 is 8. So only this 8 can change when you assign IP addresses. Okay, are we clear? So what happens in is, so you, if 8 is possible, if 8 can change, right? If 8 can change, you know, the first address is this 0, but in the generally in a network range you have some IP addresses reserved for certain purposes, so you cannot use the 0. Actually you start with 1, and even the last one, the 255 value, that is 172.16.0.255 value, you can't take, because that is also again reserved. It's for the I think the last address is for the broadcast address, this one is for the network address. So the only the remaining 254 you can use in this situation. So the first one would be 01, last one would be 0254. So in our situation, right now here you can see, now in the next example you say, okay, 26 digits are fixed, you cannot change, but you can variate 8, not 6. 32 minus 26, you can variate 6. So you can vary these 6. So the 0 is given for the network address, you start with 1, and the maximum you can change is to get 6 ones, but then 6 ones is given for the broadcast address, and you can get the maximum you can get is the 62. Okay, are we clear? Do you want me to explain that again? Just if so, please let me know. I can go through that again.
No, you
So-
were clear for me at least, yeah.
Okay. You said you want to go through once?
No, you were clear.
Okay, okay, right. So now we will go to our example here where we create the VPC. So what we are going to do, we are going to say, okay, we want this range for our VPC, and then so it's asked whether we want these are, you know, two versions, version 4 and version 6 of this IP address, but we are good with the version 4.1 for the time being. So I will say no, we don't need IPv6, and Tennessee use default. If you use dedicated, you will be charged, right? Because then you will not be sharing your resources with other users. You will have a dedicated VPC, and that is going to cost you more. So we are going to use the default Tennessee, and you can use this name. Yeah, and so once we create the subnets, you will realize how we are going to split this CIDR range for the subnets. So I'm going to create the VPC now. Okay. Now next, I go to subnets here, and now I go to create subnet. And when you create the subnet, you have to select which VPC you are going to create the subnet in. So I select my CCW VPC2, which I just created. So it shows me the CIDR block, and I can give a name here, subnet. So I'm going to create two subnets, private and public. So I put this as private 1. So you see subnets, you have to select an availability zone. So now US East 1 is the region, and this A denotes the availability zone. So you have B, C, D, E, F. So you have 6 availability zones in this US East 1 region. So I'm selecting US East 1A, and so now I'm going to split that divided by 24 to a smaller IP address range. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say, okay, I want to go from 0 to 1 to 7 in this subnet. So if I go to 1 to 7, I should restrict, I should limit I should like fix the first like 28 digits, right? I can vary only 4, only last 4 digits I can make it vary. So I put here 28, and now the name is all right, correct. So I'm going to create or I can create another subnet here itself. So I'm going to do that also at the same time. CCCW subnet. Sorry, I'm going to create private 2 because I had created another private previously. So I had public 2 and private 2. And I want to create this in a different availability zone. So in case if my if due to some issue one availability zone goes down, I can move my things to the other subnet that is in the other availability zone. So I put here, let me see if anybody is waiting. No. So I put here 0 / sorry. So I have to go from 1282255. So this should be 128. I have to start from this and then go up to that 256. So I put here another 28. Okay, so this should be the two subnets in that bigger VPC. Okay. Yeah. Now I'm going to create the subnet. So I will have both the subnets created. Next, what I want to do, I want to let's see. I have to create. So I have to now as I told you, you need to have an internet gateway to route traffic through internet. So if you go to internet gateways, you default when you create your account, you just get one internet gateway that is free in the free tier. But if you add another gateway, you will be charged. So we don't want to do that. We are going to, this is attached to one of my previous VPC. So I'm going to detach it from this VPC